All right, everyone. Welcome. Can you hear and see us? If you wouldn't mind, just type something in the chat to let us know. There's a little bit of a delay, so I can't quite tell if we're live yet. Oh, there we are. Wonderful. All right, everyone. Welcome. Can you hear and see us? If you wouldn't mind, just type something in the chat to let us know. There's a little bit of a delay, so I can't quite tell if we're live yet. Oh, there we are. All right. So, as you saw in the video, my name is Adrienne Boris, Chief Strategic Officer for Helios Opera. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for the world premiere of Stardust by Felix Gerard and B.L. Foxley. And thank you for joining us for this post-show discussion as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce Melinda Lopez tonight. And oops, sorry guys, I have a little bit of an echo in my headphones, so I'm gonna for joining us for this post-show discussion. Melinda Lopez tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Melinda Lopez. And oops, sorry guys, I have a little bit of an echo in my headphones, so I'm sorry about that. Melinda Lopez is a playwright, actor, professor, amazing all-around human theater person. She has a secret evil plan to create complex Latina women and put them center stage. Melinda Lopez is a playwright, actor, professor, amazing all-around human theater person. She has a secret evil plan to create complex Latina women and put them center stage. She is the playwright in residence at the Huntington Theater and part of the Mellon Foundation's National Playwright Residency Program. She is currently developing a long-form series for Audible, Escoria, an immigration drama set in 2018 and 1980 during the Mariel boat lift. And part of the Mellon Foundation's National Playwright Residency Program. Recent work includes her adaptation of Yerma, Huntington Theater Company, Mala, Arts Emerson, and the Guthrie Theater, and the Huntington Theater Company, Elliot Norton Award, Best Play, Arts Impulse Award, Best Solo Performance, which is also available to download on Audible, coming soon in Spanish. Back the Night, Boston Playwrights Theater, Becoming Cuba, Huntington Theater Company, North Coast Rep, and Sonia Flew, and a lot more wonderful plays. She's also an actress. She's appeared in Our Town, A Month in the Country, Persephone, Huntington Theater Company, Grand Concourse, Appropriate, and Mother Bleeper with the Hat, Speakeasy Stage, and many other plays. She's an active providing humanitarian aid for the people of Cuba and was mentioned by President Obama in his speech to the Cuban and American people in 2016. Mary Marty Walsh declared October 29th, 2016, Melinda Lopez Day in the city of Boston. She's taught playwriting at Boston University, Wellesley College, and Northeastern University. She was the first recipient of the Charlotte Woodard Award given by the Kennedy Center to a promising new voice in American theater. So I think we may be having some audio difficulties, but while I work those out, I will ask the team to introduce themselves. If we could start with Felix, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Felix Gerard.
So I think we may be having some audio difficulties, but while I work those out.
Adrian, can you try muting yourself? I think that might solve the issue.
That sounds good.
That sounds better. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Felix Gerard. I'm a composer and pianist based in Brooklyn, New York, and I wrote the score for Stardust for B.L. Fox's text, and I was the pianist on the premiere that you heard in the sound recording. And my pronouns are he, him, his.
Foxley, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm B.L. Foxley. I wrote the text, originally the 3 poems for Stardust. I'm based in London and my pronouns are she and her.
And John de los Santos?
Hi, everybody. John de los Santos. Pronouns are he, him. I live in Manhattan, and I'm the director.
Keith Browning?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Keith Browning. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I live in New York City as well. My pronouns are he, him, and I was the assistant director and lighting consultant.
And the divine Victoria Davis?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Victoria Davis, originally from Washington, D.C., currently based in Brooklyn, New York. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I had the fabulous privilege of singing this fabulous music, being directed by the fabulous directors, and having the fabulous libretto from a fabulous Londoner.
It is my profound and humble privilege to be in this room with you all, experiencing this exquisite opera on December 4th, 2020. My experience as a fan of opera and someone who is not educated with opera is that I was so profoundly moved by the journey of this female heroine who moves from this vulnerable, who am I questioning, to and exposing this deeply personal and human parts of herself to the demonic power, and then resolving in this epic incarnation of an all-powerful and sensual and joyful invocation of Mother Goddess, who literally holds our fate in her hands and snips the thread. The journey in this piece is so incredible. Words fail me. I would really love to salute the creative team and the performing artists of this exquisite production, exquisite cinematography, incredible performances, and epic themes of our humanity and life and death and why are we here and what are we doing here, which I think all great art needs to answer. I'd love to start our conversation, apart from my gushing, with the question and the comment. I understand that the poems that form the libretto for the piece were not originally written to be performed together. I wonder, B.L. Foxley, if you can comment on the creation of the libretto, and then for the creative team to talk a little bit about how these pieces came to be knit into this powerful journey. Do you want to talk a little bit about the genesis of the piece? Maybe B.L. Foxley, we can start with you.
Well, the poems started actually as part of my master's degree. And when I finished writing them, I wanted to share them with the world, and I wanted to share the journey from who am I to Mother Nature. And I've always found music to be such a powerful way of people connecting, from whether it doesn't matter like your nationalities, your gender, lifestyle. I thought it was so powerful how it can connect. So I've met Felix in a virtual group, and we managed to bring my poetry alive and turn it into this new piece. He knew Victoria, and when I heard her voice, I was like, this is it. I really hope she likes poetry, because I really wanted to sing this. And she loved it. And then obviously Felix can tell you that side of things.
Yes, would you please?
Yes, thank you so much for those kind words about Stardust. Stardust is a song cycle, so that's a little bit different from an opera in that, like, it doesn't have that narrative, because these 3 poems that B.L. Foxley gave me, she gave me a list in a PDF of different poems that she had, and these 3, I kind of like immediately hear music when I read texts sometimes, and these 3 I like really felt would be really interesting to put together and create an interesting mix. And I was super excited to work with the text because I really loved the imagery. The first poem I read was The Devil, and then I read What Am I? And then I came across Mother Nature, and we sort of figured out the order. And Victoria is a dear friend of mine. We've done countless projects together, musicals, recitals. She was in my drag opera last year before the pandemic. And we've always wanted to do like a big piece, and I wanted to write something that was like an homage to her talent. And so this was like the piece I decided, and the timing just worked out. So I was like super excited, and Helios signed it on, and then John came, and I love his work, and this was like, yeah, it just happened to the stars all aligned for Stardust. Hey, tagline, what? Anyway.
I have so many questions and I don't know where to land, but I guess I'm going to take that thread and ask La Divina. Victoria, this piece was written for you. It was created with you in mind, and you are premiering it. Have you ever done a project like this before? What is it like to have a piece that is created for your voice and your physical embodiment?
First of all, it is extremely humbling to be a part of a piece like this, because it's not very often first that you get to work with a living composer and a living librettist, especially in classical music, unfortunately. But it's also not very often that you get to work with such profound text and such a prolific and pretty much a prodigy in composition and in skill as a musician and artist. Have I done something like this before? No, nowhere near. Nowhere near. How does it feel to do something like this? I have no words. As Felix said, I've worked with him multiple times in multiple different scenarios. I would say the best would be the drag opera in playing Princess Celestia and Tadra Dodger. But I've always considered him, pretty much since the moment I met him, to be my personal Beethoven. Just because his hair is fabulous, but because there's such passion in his playing. And I could tell when he wrote this music, because B.L. Foxley's text is so moving and so powerful, that it was amazing. I messaged them both. I'm like, oh my God, this is completely astounding. So yeah, it was amazing. I'm sorry, did I answer all of your questions?
I think so. I mean, I'm struck in part too by the question, in this moment of pandemic and in this moment of the pause, right? We're all in a pause. We're all in a place where we're re-examining everything that we are, everything that we do as citizens, as artists, as people. This piece just strikes me as that essential question: who are we? Who am I? How do I fit? What is my purpose? And the narrative that draws on these ancient totemic themes. And I wanted to turn the conversation or the questions to John de los Passos and Keith Browning, who are the director, cinematographer, assistant director, director of photography. Would you be able to comment a little bit on the larger themes that you have brought up through the pictures, through the way that you have chosen to represent this story visually, which feels so modern and thrilling and playful, as well as deeply powerful and moving? John, would you like to start and comment a little bit on what you brought to the directing of the piece?
Yeah. First of all, Melinda, thank you for your assessment. It's so eloquent, and I think that we should use it for the program notes. this live because
You got
that's so beautifully articulated it. This was a really difficult initial project because, again, you have these three beautiful pieces, but how do they go together? And, you know, I direct a lot of theater and opera, and I'm always trying to figure out what is the through line, what is the arc, because, you know, you have to create unity. And, you know, I thought to myself, you've got these, this isn't the same woman. All three of these really are very different women. How do we reconcile that? And then also with very little time and very little budget. And as I was looking through it, each one of the pieces to me perpetuated or represented a different modern myth for me. In Mother Nature, every religion, every civilization really has a Mother Nature, an Earth Mother somewhere in its antiquated mythology. And then obviously in the devil, most religions have some kind of a figure like that they use to keep people in their doctrine. And then in What Am I, you have the myth of racial equality, which we all know is not a reality. And so I thought, okay, each one of these contains a different myth. How can I reconcile that? And then the idea of the three fates, who are like the original mothers of us all, who create this life force and then determine it and then take it away. And so that really struck me as a way into this, to see if I could assign each one of the three stories to a different one of the three fates, or the moire, as they are in Greek. And honestly, the idea of doing it as a triptych came from two main influences, from Francis Bacon, the painter who did a series of triptych portraits, and then also of Andy Warhol and John Waters, who did a number, their films basically had simultaneous screens going on. And I thought that could be a really interesting way, since we're going to be doing it mostly in portrait format, which also is a good souvenir of all the Zooming we're doing. So I think that, you know, that aspect will also kind of timestamp it as this time right now. But there was so much, so many things are evoked in the text and in the music as well. And because Victoria was such an eloquent performer, it really, all of those colors came together in this beautiful kaleidoscope. And when I was figuring it out, I thought, my God, I have so much to figure out. I need to bring on someone who can help me visualize this, because if we're just going to be in a room with, you know, a very simple black screen and have to be really creative with our budget, how do I make it look beautiful? And Keith was a singer that I had worked with many years ago as a director, and I saw on his Instagram that he had gone into the realm of photography and lighting, and I thought this would be a great project to utilize his talents. So I'd love to bring him in to talk about that.
Thanks, John. And again, Melinda, I agree with John. What you said about the work was beautiful. And specifically what you said leading up to speaking about the creative direction for the film was a sense of playfulness. I'll never forget, my late father used to say to me before every audition that I would take, don't forget to have fun. And that's something that's lived through my whole life in terms of my creative pursuits. And with what John was saying, I took COVID as a time for me to say, you know, I've focused creatively my whole life on singing. And I'm grateful for that time. And I greatly appreciate the effort and the energy that I put into it. But now here's a chance for me to have fun. And quite literally, I've been sitting in my room with lights from IKEA. Victoria knows this. I used to just say, we're going to light you with IKEA lights. Lights from IKEA, a projector that I play movies on sometimes, and have just literally been having fun. I thought coming into this project, I have imposter syndrome. Like, there's no way that I should be in here. And was so grateful for the opportunity. And when I realized that this was really just a playground, a place for us to splash in the puddles of creativity, and living in this moment in which really there's no room for asking for forgiveness with where we are right now. It was just the most perfect moment. It was a storm that was quite great for all of us in the room.
I was just really struck by the use of the, I mean, I don't know what that initial image is, if it's a ball of twine or it's like rope, it's like twine, it's thread, and the way it knits all the pieces together. Yeah.
$2 from Michael's.
Which is, and it's gorgeous, right? And then, and this feeling of connection, and yet the fragility, right? The exquisite fragility that we're all experiencing, painful. I want to also acknowledge John de los Pasos is also a screenwriter and an acclaimed choreographer. Keith is an opera singer. We have a creative team that is multiple, as they say, multiple slashies, people who do many different things. I'm super curious, having dug into the bios. Let me see if I can get this right. B.L. Foxley, I think you wrote your first poems at age 8. And Felix Harar, you wrote your first compositions at age 15. Is that right? Do I have that right? And I'm curious about this, the calling that you have experienced to come to create opera. Do you both want to comment a little bit on being artists from a very young age?
Yeah, I'll go first. First of all, my last one's actually pronounced Gerard.
I'm sorry, Gerard. Thank you.
People think it's always Hispanic, no big deal. So I wrote my first opera when I was 15, but I started composing and playing piano when I was 5 years old. I really was inspired by opera because I loved watching the broadcasts on PBS from the Met as a kid. So I ended up being homeschooled because I kind of was like at a crossroads with my parents, where I would be really frustrated where I didn't have enough time to study music or practice as much as I want to, as opposed to doing other things. So I started homeschooling when I was 13, and I had seen my first opera like a few years before that, and I was like really obsessed with the form. It was the Marriage of Figaro of Mozart. And just like kind of just like my sister and I would like, we would do like how people like watch movies, we like watch operas. We'd like decide which opera we were going to rent from like the library for like the week or the couple of days. And I basically like just did a lot of listening and stuff. And I've always loved creative writing. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And just bringing the idea for the first opera, which is kind of like my bad one, which no one will ever see the light of day of. And the only person that will like it's my mother, because she keeps the score on display, or my teacher back home in Connecticut. It was based on a play I had written, and I was just really interested in like adapting things. And ever since then, I've kind of become obsessed with that. So just from that obsession of putting like text with music to convey a point of view, I just thought was like the coolest thing in the world. And I just fall in love with opera all the time, over and over again, for like different things. And so it's like a super fun thing, and it's a lot of work that goes into it, understanding it, but it does have its rewards, and that keeps me motivated to keep writing.
Sorry, thank you so much. Bill Foxley, do you want to talk a little bit about being a poet?
Yeah, I started writing, I think I wrote my first story when I was about 8 years old. I wrote it actually called The Fallen Star, so astronomy has always been a big part of my life, funnily enough. And I started writing poetry, I think in my early teens. And for me, writing has always been was always how I communicate with the world and how I wanted to tell my story. Fantasy, I just sort of fell into because it was so limitless, is what I loved about it. But in terms of what led to going into wanting to work in something in classical music and opera, I'd been a fan for years of classical, so the opportunity to get to be a part, have my writing part of that, at first it felt like something that was a dream, but then would never happen. And then when it was actually starting to happen, it still felt surreal to like 3 hours ago tonight. So yeah, it was just a really magical experience being a part of this.
Thanks, Melinda. Is it okay if we move to a couple of audience questions?
Yes, I'd love that. Can I ask just one last question to humor me, please? Which is, I'd love to ask Victoria Davis about your experience creating this piece in quarantine. Something about the voice that wants to be shared and resonate against other bodies. And I'm curious about how this piece was created. Were you alone when you were singing, or were you, what was the protocol? How did you do it?
Well, first, the music was presented to me while I was at home. As I'm sure you know, New York City has been under a pretty serious quarantine for the last 9 months. So this piece was probably, to be honest, one of the first pieces that I touched in a number of months, seriously. And it was very interesting. First, because there was no reference point for the music. Everything was based off of literal pen to paper. And of course I could text Felix and say, hey, so this note, what do you, why? But it was interesting. I was alone for the most part, and I was in my house, and it was me, as some folks would say, banging my head against the wall, just trying to make sure that I did justice to this piece. I couldn't go to a voice teacher per se, because in me learning the piece, they're also learning the piece with me. And there's not much that they can help me with outside of, oh, you sound nice. Vocally, I think your technique's pretty solid. Maybe work here on this A. In working with John and Keith, it was interesting because you're in an enclosed space. First of all, of course, we practiced protocol for COVID, of course. But it was interesting being in an enclosed space with other artists, and artists, we're warm people. We like hugging and like high-fiving and bumping fist and whatever. And one of the things that I thought about recently, actually, when I was talking to a friend, was I think that there were minimal times where the three of us touched each other. And that interaction, it's just a human interaction generally. And it's just a part of us showing that we care about each other, we acknowledge each other, but that was taken away. So that was kind of weird, but it was also fulfilling because I got to be in a room with other artists who I could bounce things off. It wasn't through Zoom, which Zoom has become a close companion for all of us. It wasn't through FaceTime. It wasn't over the phone. So there was a feeling of relief in being around these, quite frankly, these two creative geniuses, because like you said, the IKEA lights, all of the lighting that you see is from an IKEA light, 2 of them. And everything that you see with cinematography was done with phones. Both of their phones. So that experience in itself was it was ingenious, but it was interesting because I sat there a few times trying to figure out how we were going to pull this together with 2 phones, 2 IKEA lamps, a black drop, maybe Google, and us playing the music to make sure that we're in sync. But it turned out to be wonderful. I missed I wish I could give them a hug now, because I loved working with them. It was so much fun. I felt like I'd known them for at least a decade. So the love and the heart of being an artist and that interaction was there, but it was weird being in COVID and doing that, but it was worth it. It was worth it. It shows that we are triumphant in whatever we do. We keep it pushing and we keep it moving.
Yes, well, we must. I see a question in the YouTube chat. I don't know if I'm getting them all, but this looks like it's a question from Comp Arturo Fernandez. Felix, you said you had a drag opera. I know this isn't related to Stardust, but now I'm incredibly curious about that. So what went into that?
So I graduated with my master's from Brooklyn College last year, and my master's thesis was a drag opera on Mother Goose fairy tales. And there's a evil witch, and then there's the good fairy godmother, and they have a showdown, and Mother Goose sort of goes on these adventures. She runs an inn, she has a record label, she has a weave shop, and it's all, if you want to see the video of it, it's on my portfolio on my website and on my Vimeo. But I don't want to like, it's a whole thing, and there's a whole gay wedding at the end, and Victoria's character comes out. It's a whole thing, but it's all online if you want to go check it out. It's called Mother Goose.
And can you just state your website if people want to go and find you?
Yes, it's felixgerardmusic.com.
Okay.
And you can also find Mother Goose on Instagram at MG Opera.
Wonderful. I have another question here from Bishop asking, one of the most compelling parts of the performance for me was the handling of the ball of yarn by Victoria, and I will also agree with that. What were your thoughts during those moments? Yes, I think it's for you, but I think John, if you want to comment as well, and Keith on this creating and the setting up of that moment, and Victoria, you're still muted.
Yeah, I can set it up really quickly. So the basic myth behind the three morai is that one of them will begin by spinning the thread of life. Every time a new human is born, their life is a thread. And then the second sister will pull the thread out to whatever length is predetermined by the three fates for how long they will live. And then when their time is up, the third one will cut it. And something that I thought was important was, and Miranda, you kind of touched on this, was how the last shot, we go to one screen and one woman. We see Victoria, and there's no thread, there's no scissors, nothing. And the threads and scissors have been omnipresent throughout the whole piece. The idea is that after we see what each of the three sisters does, one life is ended when we see this explosion, this supernova of stardust. And then out of that stardust, there is a new woman. There is a new soul that's emerging out of all of this. So the idea being that, even though these three fates are controlling everything we do, we have to make our own decisions and our own explorations and discovery to circumnavigate the three myths of these songs, the three obstacles of each of these songs. So the ending really represents this new woman with a new perspective on what her life can be.
I think John described it perfectly. One of the things that he wanted to make explicitly clear when we were filming was the fragility of life being in this ball of thread. And I think because he explained it in such a way that life is like a piece of thread, is extremely fragile. It can bend, sometimes it can be cut. Sometimes it can just be a straight line. Sometimes it swerves and has these manipulative points by what some people would say is unseen entities or even karma. And so I think because I was able to see that in handling these pieces of thread, I think it caused me instinctively to hold on to it very differently, because it was like, as he described to me in that room, it was like when you're pulling these threads, it's like a new life. And you decide how short it's going to be, or how long it's going to be, or when they're going to cut it. And I think bringing that to life in each character and how they manipulated what I would describe this new soul, or this person in their battles, was beautifully written and directed by both John and Keith.
So we have time for one more audience question, and it looks like we have one, so go right ahead.
So this question is from Ana Quintana, and it's specifically to Victoria, but I would love to hear from anyone else who wishes to comment, which is what was your favorite part of this process? Maybe Victoria, if you'd like to start, and if other members of the creative team would want to add on.
That's a very difficult question to answer. Oddly enough, I would say my favorite part was sitting with the music. It was getting it in my body. It was reading the poetry over and over and over again. It was finding relation between this beautiful Black woman who resides in London and the commonalities between myself and being able to see the revelations that I had with the poetry and how it was displayed in the music. So it was literally sitting on my couch and looking at these notes and looking at why, or figuring out why they did what they did with both the music and the text, and trying my best to embody that.
I don't want to piggyback on. I'm just wondering, BL Foxley, if you want to comment on what it's like hearing your poetry in song.
It's very surreal, because especially as a writer, it's very much a solitary job. So it was always a case of I write it and then people can read it, but to hear it performed by someone with such a beautiful voice as well is something that I won't forget in a long time, because it's such an experience to see how people interpret your writing, and to hear the emotion in her voice with each word in each poem. Because when she's singing it, and each time I've heard it, I can remember being at my dad's house about 3 a.m. and writing them, and all these emotions coming flooding back. So it was very emotional hearing her sing it.
Are there any other favorite moments before we wrap up? Yes, Keith.
I always have this issue coming on Zoom, like finding the mute button again. It always has like that little delay time. I think for me, I am usually in Victoria's shoes as the singer, as the performer. My favorite moment, but also the scariest moment, was John sending out a screenplay. And I'm sitting there looking at this like, I have never seen one of these in my life, much less for an opera. How am I going to do this? How am I going to get my mind around this? And it was a great challenge that turned into, as I was saying, a lot of fun. It turned into play. So that was my most enjoyable part, meeting the challenge.
Yeah, I would like to say that, favorite is a relative thing because there were many favorites, but one thing that we haven't talked about that I'd like to is the first kind of visual thing that idea that I had was to collaborate with my artist friend, Fabian Hernandez, who designed the light box that you see in The Devil, that beautiful circular box. I literally had met him the day before I was chosen for this job. And he was talking about how, the pandemic had really destroyed his art career and nobody was commissioning things. And he said, yeah, I started working on these weird light box things. I don't know if they're any good, but, hopefully one day I can sell one. And when they said yes, and I started looking at the text, I thought, wait a minute, the devil can be a reflection in Victoria's eyes represented by one of these amazing sculptures. And so I was able to bring him on to design a special piece just for it. And so my favorite part really has been allowing all of the artists in this, between Keith and Victoria and Felix and everyone, to actually create something new. And I'm really, really grateful to Helios for entrusting all of us and letting us continue to make art in this time when so many people don't have the opportunity.
I too have many favorite moments. I think this morning when I when Julian and Adrian sent out on the group thread the YouTube video for us to watch before the premiere, and seeing not only John's directing but Keith's lighting, that was so exciting for me. I always get excited hearing something for the first time, and that was very interesting for this experience, because usually I'm in person and I'm a collaborative pianist as well. So usually Victoria and I would be in person collaborating on the song cycle, and the song cycle is quite an intense piece musically. There's a lot of things, and to do it virtually is about 10 times as hard to do, because I basically have to lay it down first and then she sings on top of it. So think about it as like karaoke on steroids. And that's like what this, the musical part was. But hearing that come together and then seeing John and Keith's beautiful work and then all that like come together, those were my two favorite parts. And it was so exciting to see that because usually I'm in the room for that or watching, but yeah, it was like a, yeah. So I'm super happy with how that all turned out. And this was, yeah, this project is definitely a favorite of mine from this season.
I think, Adrian, are we approaching the end of our time here?
Yes, we are. But any words to close, please go ahead.
Well, I would very much like to thank Helios Opera and humbly suggest that this team have an opportunity to do the second song cycle of this epic story. I've found great inspiration from each of you in how you have managed to collaborate across oceans and continents in this challenging moment, and finding both the intimacy of the human question, who am I, as well as the epic and ancient human condition that we are bound by. Our life is fragile and can be snapped in an instant. And at times we have no control over that. The scale of the music and the beauty of the poetry creates a context for understanding our fragile lives. For me personally, I feel like the greatest art helps put a container around the chaos that we live through. And each art form does it a little bit differently. And with opera, we have the exquisite experience of the human voice and also this, the poetry, the music, and the visuals that you all have created. And I celebrate you. We have a lot of love from YouTube. Thank you so much to all the artists for their amazing work. From Theodora, thank you so much for creating this. From Anna. I would also very much like to thank you personally. Adrian, is there something that you would like to say to wrap up?
Well, I think there's something in my eye, first of all. But thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts, Melinda. This was such a wonderful opening night talk. And thank you once again to our amazing, beautiful, committed, creative team. We're amazingly proud of what you have created together, and we've loved collaborating with you on this. Thank you to our fantastic audience. If you liked what you saw tonight, we will be screening the piece and then doing a talk similar to this after each screening. So please tell your friends and colleagues. Our hashtags are hashtag Stardust 2020 and hashtag The Devil Was Me. So now you get that hashtag. Please share widely. Please take care of yourselves, be safe, and thank you so much to everyone for being here. Good night.